What's up, everybody? 2 hours of Gojo and Golic is about to start. We have some great guests. We have some great programming to get to. We're going to talk about Maxx Crosby getting a historic new deal, pretty incredible money, making him the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history. That's a lot of dough. Plus, DK Metcalf has requested a trade. We will talk about possible landing spots for him. And the Cavs have clinched a playoff berth. We'll talk NBA, what we can expect for the postseason as we start winding down the regular season. All that and more coming up on Gojo and Golic.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Gojo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jesse Cofield with you guys. Great show coming up. As always, download, subscribe, rate, and review us. Leave us a 5-star rating and watch us live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the Gojo and Golic YouTube channel. Subscribe and hit the bell so you're ready to go on there. Feels like a great day for our guest, Dianna Russini, Athletics Senior NFL Insider, going to join us at 9 o'clock Eastern. As Dad, it feels like every time I look up and check the timeline, there is some new bit of NFL news hitting the streets. And if you're not following Dianna Russini this morning, you're missing out because there is plenty of news that we can get to with her. Teams reaching out about the availability of T. Higgins, even though he's franchise tagged by the Bengals. DK Metcalf, who has requested a trade yesterday. Apparently, the Seahawks seeking a first and a third round pick, according to Dianna Russini from him. Joey Bosa released last night. And oh, by the way, Maxx Crosby yesterday became the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history. So safe to say the NFL showing up and showing out for the free agent period so far. And we haven't even gotten to actual free agency.
Yeah, exactly. March 12th is actual free agency when we start that day. The barrage of phone calls and money that will be spent has everybody's head spinning until the NBA free agency hits. And then even NFL players go, wow, those guys get paid a lot of money. But there's going to be a lot of money going out. Right now, it's just kind of setting the table, though some players have signed, like Maxx Crosby, Zack Baun we'll talk about from Philadelphia. It's about getting the work done before free agency, not letting guys get to free agency, preparing your cap, restructuring deals like the Cowboys have done with a couple of players, kind of setting the table for the money that you're going to spend. Remember, the cap went way up yet again, over $50 million over the last 2 years. So there are some teams, the Patriots, have an ungodly amount of money to spend. Some teams, like the Saints, are in cap hell as well. So they have to manage their money differently on how they look for players. But it is interesting. We definitely have a glut of players who are asking to be released or asking, I should say, to be traded. Myles Garrett. We haven't even mentioned Myles Garrett's name in a while because it's been a while since he's requested a trade, and so much has happened after that. There truly is no offseason in the NFL. Oh, by the way, just finishing the combine as well.
Yeah, and remember, when you hear players requesting a trade, this is just the other side of the coin of the other thing that we've seen all offseason, which, like you pointed out yesterday, Dad, I'm sure Joe Thuney wasn't thrilled about getting traded while he still had years left on his contract from the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm sure Cooper Kupp isn't thrilled with the prospect of being released. Neither was Joey Bosa. And so this cuts both ways. Teams deemed those players too costly to keep on their roster at this point in their production. And players like DK Metcalf and others are saying, hey, my production's exceeding my pay and I want more out of you. So this is how it goes for people that want to cry greedy player.
And at the end of the day, it's the team holds all the cards, right? Derek Metcalf is under, or DK Metcalf, I'm sorry, is under contract. Myles Garrett is under contract. They don't have to be traded. then you just gauge how disgruntled will they be. Again, it has never really worked out for a player to skip an entire season and lose out on their money. So it's what can you work out? You look at DK Metcalf. They're the Seahawks supposedly asking a first and a third, and DK wants $30 million. Well, I mean, you look at T. Higgins, who is franchise tagged, the cost will be a little more, but just a little more, right? For T. Higgins, it's a couple of first rounders, and I'm sure T. Higgins wants $30 million a year. So the wide receiver position has really exploded money-wise, and as the table gets set higher, and Jamar Chase, by the way, is going to set the table higher. He is going to be the newest highest paid non-quarterback. Maxx Crosby can hold that position until Jamar Chase signs. So just like we talked about with Saquon Barkley getting more money to kind of up the value of the running back, the value of the wide receiver has been going through the roof.
That's a good segue to talk about Maxx Crosby. So, again, we'll talk about the rest of that with Dianna when she joins us in about an hour and get an update on what the market looks like for a lot of these players, because I think that's the looming question is, all right, you can ask for whatever you want, but who's willing to pay it on the other side? For Maxx Crosby, the Las Vegas Raiders were willing to pay it on the other side. They had a 3-year, $106.5 million contract extension to his deal that had 2 years left on a 5-year extension that he signed in 2022, but he didn't have any guaranteed money left on that. He now has a lot of guaranteed money left on this, $91.5 million guaranteed on this contract. So, Dad, as you mentioned, it currently makes him the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL. It is worth noting, and we talked to Field Yates about this yesterday, quarterback can be easy when you've got a glut of guys that are all coming up on paydays at once, because to Field's point, you just pay the next guy a little bit more than the last guy got, and you stack them up one after the other because they're the next quarterback up for a payday. That's kind of how it seems like it's working for wide receiver and pass rusher in tandem. When you look at the 4 highest paid non-quarterbacks, it's now Maxx Crosby at number 1, just a little bit ahead of Justin Jefferson, who is the next highest at number 2, followed by Nick Bosa at number 3, and then CeeDee Lamb at number 4. So wide receiver and pass rusher have been the other two positions that oscillate back and forth between being the highest paid. And so, to your point, Jamar Chase, the Bengals, we haven't heard much about that negotiation, and now that this is dropped, there is another data point for them to work off of, because they've said, not that we want to make Jamar Chase the highest paid wide receiver in NFL history, but we want to make him the highest paid non-quarterback, and that just got a new data point added to the conversation.
Listen, the only question for Jamar Chase is his first number average annual value going to be with a 4 or a 3, right? It's either going to be in the high 30s or it's going to be 40. So, I mean, we everybody knows the numbers. It's just a matter of figuring it out, and then it'll be another wide receiver will jump over the edge rusher as the highest paid. And you're right, that's the position. I can't see another position jumping into that fray, quite honestly, at least not for a little while, because of the value of the passing league, even though Saquon and Derrick Henry kind of turned it into a bit of a running league this year. It's still a passing league. You're still looking for a glut of wide receivers. And listen, I'm glad the Raiders did this. You don't get rid of a great edge rusher, the best player on your team, who is 27 years old. That's not the way you go about your business, right? I mean, so the Browns will deal with Myles Garrett, who's a couple of years older, and the Browns and Raiders are kind of in a similar situation on, are they going to be contenders? But the Raiders at least had the wherewithal to say, we have a 27-year-old stud. He's going to be part of the rebuild of this team. So I think that's a step in the right direction for the Raiders.
Well, that is, and Maxx wants to be there. Maxx seems to have a desire to be the face of that franchise in a way that Myles Garrett no longer does. And you're right, though, to plant their flag on him is important. And again, he's another one we could talk to Dianna about, because I saw her reports yesterday that there were points where it felt like, hey, this negotiation might fall through, and other teams were watching. Because, Dad, the biggest thing you could say about Maxx Crosby outside of last year, where he played 12 games before he got shut down due to an ankle surgery, the guy has always been available, and he is always on the field. Like the Mike Tomlin line, the classic line is, I'd rather say woe than sick 'em when it comes to a player. I'd rather have to pull you back than coach you to give me more. Maxx Crosby, there was the conversation of, hey, we've got to work on as an organization, how do we get this guy a break? How do we manage his body a little bit better going forward? Christian Wilkins in that signing was hopefully supposed to go a long way towards that. And so he is that ultimate team guy in the fact that he's always on the field. He's a nightmare. He's incredibly productive. And he's also playing with incredible effort and energy at all times. He's everything that you want in a franchise cornerstone. But the other side of this, Dad, is he's kind of like Giannis, where he is constantly reminding the Las Vegas Raiders, I'm not here for the rebuild nonsense. I'm not here to sit around and watch us retool again. I've done enough losing already in my career. This was him the other day on the Rush podcast talking about Aaron Rodgers and the potential of signing him as a veteran free agent this offseason.
First year off an Achilles is one of the hardest things to do. You've seen it happen with Kirk. Kirk had a down year. It happened with Aaron. I mean, he struggled, like you said, early on, but he got better as the season went. I think with all the doubt and all the negativity around Aaron Rodgers, he needs to retire, things like that, he's getting cut by the Jets. I think he's going to come back and have I know he's 42 or 41.
Are you going to say MVP?
No, I think he's going to have a big year this year, and I hope it's in our town. That would be
And so, Dad, I can hear a lot of people going, is he serious recruiting Aaron Rodgers after what we saw last year to the Raiders organization? But the reason you saw a guy like Quinnen Williams in New York ticked off, and the reason you have Maxx Crosby excited about that prospect is he's seen what it's like operating out of the bargain bin, and he's sick of it. And Aaron at least represents a proven commodity around the NFL, even if it's diminished at this point.
Yeah, if they're not in the quarterback hunt in the draft, and we'll discuss that, You'd rather have Aaron Rodgers than Aiden O'Connell, right? They released Gardner Minshew. He's going to be a free agent who was nicked up. But I mean, it's you would definitely rather have Aaron Rodgers, at least for the year, maybe two, until you find your quarterback. Because are they going to find their quarterback? Is it Shedeur Sanders? Is their greatest Shedeur Sanders worthy of a high pick? Remember, they picked 6. And it's possible they would have to move up to get Shedeur Sanders. Now you're talking about a team depleted in talent, giving up assets, most likely draft picks, to move up to get the quarterback of the future in Shedeur Sanders. Or do they wait? Do they wait, fill the void with a veteran like Aaron Rodgers to try and get better? That's going to be their decision. A, they could like Shedeur Sanders. B, you like him to a point of how many assets do we give up if we have to move up to get Shedeur Sanders? And C, what does life look like without Shedeur Sanders? We get a veteran in here like an A-Rod and go with that. It's a team certainly on the rebuild. Listen, they brought in Christian Wilkins last year to try and help Maxx Crosby. He only played 5 games. They only had 38 sacks as a defense. So they need help in a lot of places. But you're not getting anywhere without a quarterback. And even though Maxx Crosby wants Aaron Rodgers, and it may be the right fit this year because of the quarterback system, that's also not the quarterback of the future. That would be a place card holder until you really start your engines again with who you think will be the quarterback of the future.
And maybe a little bit more inclined to absorb that now that you have signed Maxx Crosby to a long-term extension. Now that you have Pete Carroll installed in what you'd imagine is going to be a window they've got to work in, whereas last year with Antonio Pierce, it still felt like you were on that trial run, and the results reflected that. So the Raiders' next move is going to be important, but this one, obvious, well-deserved, and makes all the sense in the world to make sure that Maxx Crosby continues to wear the silver and black, and right now be the face of your franchise in lieu of a quarterback or anyone in any other position. Dad, it is interesting. They secured a franchise player, and the Eagles also did yesterday. But, man, the price tags they did it at is really emblematic of positional value and the difference there, because we saw yesterday the Philadelphia Eagles re-signed a player who was a finalist for Defensive Player of the Year in Zack Baun. They re-sign him. He gets big-time money to stick around in Philadelphia. But comparatively, Dad, what you're dealing with there versus what we're dealing with that, 3 years and $51 million, including $34 million guaranteed and an additional 1.5 in incentives and escalators. Dad, it's like the 4th highest inside linebacker contract in the NFL right now. And so not only are they replacing inside linebacker, which is comparatively less valuable, but they were also able to do it on a pretty steep bargain for a guy that was the best player, or one of the best players, I should say, Jalen Carter, the best player on that defense last year. The Eagles can continue to do this offseason on easy mode.
You want to talk about great timing awards. Sometimes it's just works for you, both player and team. Zack Baun was a third-round pick of the New Orleans Saints in 2020. He was basically a special team player, never totaled more than 30 tackles while he was with New Orleans. Signs the one-year deal in Philly and has 151 tackles. As you mentioned, he's up for Defensive Player of the Year, and they get a Super Bowl ring, and he gets paid, and he's happy to get paid, and he's behind Roquan Smith, who's making $20 million average annual value, Fred Warner 19. He's even with basically Tremaine Edwards at $18 million a year. You're right. He's one of the highest paid at his position, but it's a position that doesn't really demand a lot of highest paid cap numbers when you're talking about edge rushers, wide receivers, cornerbacks, quarterbacks. You know, it's the inside linebacker, the tight end, and the running backs are all basically in the teens or just touching that $20 million mark, like they did with Saquon, $20 million a year with the extension average annual value, and now Baun at $18 million. So listen, and they'll try and save money in other spots. I still don't know if they can sign, Josh Sweat, Milton Williams, Mekhi Becton, all their three other big free agents. But this was a big get. This was a monster get to get the leading tackler of that defense back.
He's the one of the important parts of the way Vic Fangio operates on defense, and what he did both as a guy that can offer some pass rush juice, but was better in coverage than I think most people expected going into this season.
Yeah.
This was the easy must prioritize in terms of their free agent signings. I think they're going to get priced out by Milton Williams. I think he's in for a pretty strong payday. I think Mekhi Becton, while a very good player who made strides with them, it probably also going to be someone that, because of the lack of quality interior offensive line free agents in the market, might get more than Philly probably should pay for him at this point, considering what that team is capable of at that position. Zack Baun, to me, felt like the only one that you really needed to make sure was back in Philadelphia. And like you said, Dad, because it's running back and linebacker that we're talking about, it's a different sort of flex. And because you've already taken care of wide receiver and quarterback, have your offensive line situated, especially on the perimeter, fixed up, and oh, by the way, hit on some of the premier positions like a star defensive, we'll just say defensive lineman. I know Jalen Carter's not an edge rusher, but God, what he does from the interior. Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell, you release Darius Slay, you're going to have to figure that out opposite them. But you've hit on so many premier positions either by taking care of them earlier on or drafting well at that spot that now you can afford to go out and, Dad, send a message. We talk about this all the time. Think about what other free agents see. Everyone else in that Eagles locker room. If you go and perform at a high level, you'll be rewarded by this team. And that matters still, even if people don't want to admit it all the time.
And they don't waste time doing it either, right? I mean, we'll talk about Dallas and the moves they're making, but they seem to pay late. Philly, pays on time, pays for the effort. And you're right. It all works like a machine. It all works hand in hand when you draft well and bring in free agents at a nice clip. It gives you flexibility to kind of then pick and choose and say, oh my God, we can't lose all this talent. Well, maybe you can, but you can pick and choose of who you want to come back. And Zack Baun was obviously a priority to get him back.
We always say when it comes up to teams like the Cowboys that are dragging their feet on paying important guys, the message to the rest of the locker room of, if you're not going to pay blank, this all-pro performer, this guy that's doing his thing, then what does that mean when I come up? For the Eagles, if you're not going to pay the guy that was Offensive Player of the Year, a finalist for Defensive Player of the Year, who are you going to pay? The Eagles said, we're going to squash that a week before free agency and make sure that we're good to go. So more money coming out, I'm sure, in the next few days, as we are just getting started with all of the NFL free agency news. Coming up next, though, you mentioned an important team in this process. The Dallas Cowboys. Money coming out for them already. Restructures left and right. Are we actually buying change in Big D, or should we strap in and brace for more of the same? We'll tell you the key difference this offseason for Dallas next on Gojo and Golic.
Welcome back to Gojo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr. and Mike Golic Sr. here with you guys. And fellas, there's been a trade request in Seattle. So DK Metcalf wants to hit the market. Seahawks also, we know, releasing Tyler Lockett, one of the most prolific pass catchers, in history for them. So what do you guys think about this happening? Apparently the Seahawks were not pleased with the news leaking that DK Metcalf wanted a trade while they were trying to celebrate Tyler Lockett's career there. So apparently they had already been entertaining talks about this, but now the news is out there. What do you guys think? Where could we see DK ending up?
Yeah, well, listen, while I am also sad that Tyler Lockett's reign and tenure in Seattle is over and would enjoy celebrating that, Tyler Lockett for years was an auto ad on my fantasy football team, especially when it was him and Russell Wilson there. That combination felt like it had that prime Ben Roethlisberger, Antonio Brown level of ESP and connection between the two, where I said, and I think I told Tyler Lockett this very awkwardly in an interview once, that I would bet my life on the connection between him and Russell Wilson as the strongest bond in my life. And so seeing him go sucks. At the same time, Dad, the Seahawks feeling sour because they wanted to celebrate a player they were cutting from the team is sort of laughable to me. Like, you were sending him off to pasture. He didn't ask for this, and now you're all bent out of shape because DK Metcalf spoiled the party by asking for more money. Oh, no, woe is you.
Yeah, that's kind of laughable. I would say we move on from that. That's just a ridiculous thought. You're right. Yeah, we're going to release you, but we want to honor you. We want to honor you as you get carried out on your shield away from our team to not contribute anymore to our team. We want to honor you. Tyler Lockett, just another Cooper Kupp available at 31 in a trade and may get cut. Devontae Adams 32 and cut. Tyler Lockett, I think he's 32 years old and cut. So there's certainly some elder wide receivers available. It seems to be the position we're talking about the most this offseason, either guys getting paid, restructuring deals, or that are now on the open market or for trade. So, I mean, this is a team that clearly uses the wide receivers. Jackson Smith and Jigba was the guy last year who really stood out for Jackson or for Seattle. The wide receivers were the top three receivers on the team. Jackson Smith and Jigba, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett were all 100 receptions, 66 receptions, 49 receptions, and Noah Fant had 48. So it's a team that uses their wide receivers and now gets rid of their wide receivers, save for Smith and Jigba, who is really blossoming as the star. Listen, DK is only 27 years old. He is a beast catching the ball. Now, they say Seattle says they want a first and a third for him. They're not going to get a first and a third for him. That's almost franchise tag-ish, first and a third. DK says he wants $30 million. Again, you can ask for whatever you want, and we know the value of the wide receivers has gone up. But he's been in the league 6 years. He's had 6,000-yard seasons. 3,000-yard seasons. The other 3 seasons have been 900-yard seasons, so right at close to 1,000 yards. He's still an incredibly valuable wide receiver. It's just where you slot him in money-wise. If you're going to trade for him, you have to give up assets. And then you have to renegotiate with him because he's got 1 year left, I think, at $18 million on his deal. Or Seattle is not going to release him. This is DK Metcalf asking for a trade. It's kind of like the Myles Garrett thing. You can ask for whatever you want, but if the team still wants you in their plans, they're not going to trade you, and you're going to have to then make a decision.
Well, there's also a chance, and I think I saw Jackson Bevins bring this up on Twitter yesterday, that this could all be posturing and DK could do an extension with Seattle. There's nothing that precludes that in this relationship. And we've seen, Lord knows recently, plenty of teams use, hey, go out and find teams that are willing to party with you as a way to set the market, i.e. Matthew Stafford in Los Angeles. They're not apples to apples situations, but they're comparative enough to where that could still be an opportunity here. Because, Dad, you pair him with Jackson Smith and Jigba, and you've got essentially 2 number ones. Now, they might not be high-end number ones. You might be back of the party, but still, those are guys that are incredibly productive that are going to be dealing with a new offensive coordinator in Clint Kubiak this year. You're going to have enough newness in there to where having threats in that arsenal would certainly be helpful. That being said, if Jackson Smith-Njigba goes into next season as your best wide receiver, and you've got to figure it out with other parts from that veteran markets, younger players in the draft, you're in a better position than most because JSM was incredibly productive in his role. And by the end of the season, I was going on and doing hits with Seattle Sports Radio every week. By the end of the season, he was the number one wide receiver on that team. It could oscillate back and forth at times, but it clearly looked like the offense ran through him in so many ways. And even though it's a different offense, I do think his youth and skill set definitely lends itself to that.
Yeah, I mean, I would think Seattle would want them both back, but if for some reason DK Metcalf is gone, the next closest wide receiver in receptions was about 10th on the team, Jake Bobo. Had 13 receptions, so there's not a lot behind getting rid of Lockett and
friend of the program,
gone. But I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't think Metcalf will be gone. I think they would work out an extension. But if we sit there and talk about the wide receiver position being the position of availability, looking at the teams, the teams are basically going to remain the same until they start signing wide receivers, right? Buffalo, which is in bargain basement, as you said before the show, mode with cap space. It's them, it's the Chargers, it's Pittsburgh, it's the Patriots, all looking for wide receivers.
Yeah, I think the last three you mentioned in particular, the Chargers, the Patriots, and the Steelers, all of whom top 10 in effective cap space, the Patriots and Chargers top 3, and in dire need of weapons around their quarterback. Those are all going to be the ones that are going to be picking up the phone throughout this process for any of the wide receivers that we mentioned at the high end of the market. And DK is now going to be in that vein of player. Again, a first and a third is what reportedly, according to Dianna Russini, the Seahawks are asking for. I don't know if you're going to get that for DK Metcalf, plus having to restructure that contract, but those are at least the teams that financially could afford that. And I think we said and had this conversation yesterday a little bit about Devontae Adams, Dad, but big body wide receiver is kind of a guy that in those situations where, hey, in Los Angeles, you can't really count on Greg Roman to scheme much open for you in the passing game, especially as the game goes on. And then in New England, it's going to be interesting overall what you give a young quarterback and prioritize for him in terms of receivers. But either way, some tumult in Seattle for the first time really since the end of the Russell Wilson era there. We know Mike McDonald going into year 2 as a coach, but remember, that was the last real time we had this real high-end conversation about players wanting to force their way out of there with Russ, and they certainly ended up on the right side of history with that one. Dad, this is an interesting time, though, to also talk about the Dallas Cowboys, because usually the offseason we kind of get to sit back and take a breather from Dallas because they don't do anything. Most offseasons, especially in free agency, the Dallas Cowboys are kind of sitting things out. Now, they haven't yet taken the plunge, but Dad, seeing them go out and re-sign, I should say, Osa Odigizua early on to that 4-year deal, that's a pretty palatable deal in the defensive tackle market. Felt like good business. They went and restructured CeeDee Lamb to increase money on the salary cap. They restructured Dak Prescott and created $36.6 million in cap space this season. And so they've done all of these moves, we would all assume, to go out and create more room to sign Micah Parsons, who will also, when signed, lower that cap hit, and then B, in hopes of actually doing something in free agency. And you've seen in the past, Dad, and this is my continued frustration with the Cowboys that is nothing new to their fans, but like you have Micah Parsons at the end of last year going on saying, I don't need to be the highest paid defensive player. I just want us to go out here and be active in free agency and acquire talent for this team. Basically the same things Maxx Crosby has been asking for in Las Vegas with the Raiders. The Raiders just at least play nice and act like they care what Maxx Crosby thinks. Every time you see the Cowboys brass step to the microphone, what's the refrain? Is, well, this last time around, it's, well, we don't feel like we have to go out in free agency and automatically fill this space created with guys. Like, man, like I understand some diplomacy in business, but good Lord, we don't have to totally spit in the face of these guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. They need help. They need to fill holes. And listen, they eventually pay their top players, right? They paid CeeDee Lamb. They paid Zach Martin. They paid Dak Prescott. They're going to pay Micah Parsons. And you're right. Micah Parsons will then probably be second in non-quarterbacks behind Jamar Chase. Those two will be the top two. Probably, I would imagine, non-quarterbacks paid in the NFL. And again, I think it's important every now and then to remind people that when you see these players restructuring to help a team's cap, these players aren't giving up money. It's restructuring. It's not a pay cut. What in fact they get is a monster signing bonus. They get a monster check. They get a lot of their money in one check, so they can then and spread out over time the rest of the money to lower the cap amount. So when you hear a guy restructuring to help the cap, he's actually getting a monster paycheck, which is a position, neither one of us have ever been in. It's got to be a pretty nice position. But yeah, I mean, obviously they need space, and they have space. I think they have $49 million. It changes every day, the cap space available with moves that are made and money that's saved. But effectively, I think $40-some million they have. They're going to need a lot of it to re-sign Micah Parsons. But yeah, I mean, to act like we don't need to hit free agency, yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. You got holes to fill. You have, but especially now on the offensive line, all of a sudden you start to look around and you're like, where's the talent on the O-line? And that's been diminishing for a couple of years now, that offensive line. The running attack, I mean, where they did nothing for it last year. I mean, absolutely nothing. So, yeah, I mean, they have to make moves. And you're right, to hear Jerry Jones speak out of one side of his mouth and then what the action is on the other side of his mouth just kind of makes you shake your head. That says, okay, they end up eventually paying their top talent what they're worth, but it takes them a while. They get backed up on paying, and then who are they bringing in to fill the holes? I mean, you sit there and you say you want to win now. Well, you can say one thing, but actions speak way louder than words.
Jerry Jones' exact quote was, "I'm not looking at free agency as a place to fill voids. Not if you include what might work for us in the draft and what we're doing with our own roster relative to what we want to sign." Your own roster didn't look so hot last year at this point, and you've only lost more. DeMarcus Lawrence, a longtime stalwart, could either be a release candidate or a guy that retires like Zach Martin, who just retired and had his press conference yesterday in Dallas. So your roster has atrophied at some important parts that you've counted on for a long time. And then there were the areas you were already deficient at, a la defensive tackle and the run-stopping form of that, rushing the ball on the offensive side with what you're doing at running back and beyond. And so I don't know how you can ignore these things. And again, I do feel like part of this is Jerry likes saying the aggravating thing because it gets attention, and what they may do behind the scenes could always defy that. But Dad, recent history continues to tell us, until further notice, we cannot expect the Cowboys to go out and act meaningfully in free agency, even if right now they seem to be doing all of the right things that a team would do to load up and get ready to go and pursue someone in free agency.
Yeah. I mean, listen, they take care of their own, but with holes to fill, especially on that defense. The defense gives up so much against the run. They were bottom tier as far as total defense. Now, they certainly look good at times, and Micah Parsons was injured some of last year, so that certainly hurt their stats. But yeah, what comes out of Jerry Jones' mouth and what then actually is fulfilled on the field is two different things. They need help. And free agency is a way to build your team. It's not like it's a curse. It's not like, oh, we want to do it the natural way. We want to re-sign our own great players and build through the draft. Okay, that's fine. Those are all points. But free agency is a point as well. And you have money. The cap went up. You got to use it. If you want to compete, I mean, Washington has passed you by. It's you and the Giants sitting at the bottom of that division now. Washington has sped past you. Philly has certainly passed you. So you're not even, because we talked before that of the 3 years of 13 wins and then the faltering in the playoffs. Well, they got to make a move in the playoffs. Well, now they got to get to the playoffs. Now their goal is to get to the playoffs before they can do anything in the playoffs, because they are now third in a 4-team division.
My mistake, by the way, DeMarcus Lawrence set to be a free agent. So that will be the determining factor in his future. And Dad, to Jerry's point about signing guys in-house, Jordan Lewis a free agent, their punter, Brian Anger's a free agent, Eric Kendricks, who they actually was their offseason acquisition last year, is set to be a free agent as well after coming in and being their leading tackler last year, albeit on a defense that, like you said, struggled mightily. So questions going to continue to abound there. They're off to a good start, but they haven't really gotten out of the block yet to show us they're any difference. Coming up next, let's talk about Brock Purdy and marinate on Field Yates' comments to us yesterday. Next on Gojo and Golic.
Welcome back to Gojo and Golic. Guys, the 49ers are in an unenviable position. Okay, they got to pay Brock Purdy, right? While also letting go of some of the weapons that made him look really good. So how do you guys feel about the situation? How should San Fran be approaching this cap situation with Purdy? I mean, they got to pay the man.
Well, that became the interesting part of the conversation heard all day yesterday, Dad, between Adam Schefter on the Pat McAfee show, which we'll get to in a second, and Field Yates, who joined us on the program yesterday, about the position that they're really in with Brock Purdy. And it was some stuff I hadn't considered. I want to play the Schefter sound and kind of use that as the springboard, because for so many of us, I think we thought, all right, Brock Purdy's the next quarterback up. He has played incredibly well statistically every season he's been under center and healthy for the San Francisco 49ers. He's felt like the upgrade from Jimmy Garoppolo in that offense for Kyle Shanahan. Of course, he's due for another payday here. Adam Schefter and some of the insiders saying not so fast.
But the issue is he's scheduled to make $5.1 million this season. He then could be tagged after next season for $41 million. He could be tagged the season after that for $51 million. So if you don't get a deal done with Brock Purdy and you're the Niners, and again, this would not be what Brock Purdy would want, I would imagine. Certainly not what his agent would want. He would play for $5 million this year, $41 next year, $51 the year after. You're talking about $97+ million over the next 3 years, which for most people would be incredible money, but not for a quarterback who's waiting to get paid. And so the Niners have a bit of a cap issue, cash issue, and so they can't put Brock Purdy necessarily where he might be. They can go to a certain level. They'd want to pay him, but it's not going to be, I would imagine, quite as high as most people think.
Dad, are you surprised by this?
Yeah, and I don't know how true it is. I think he's going to make at least $45 million a year, which is going to put him in the low teens as far as money made. And here's the thing: if you're now again, they can use those tools. This would be Kirk Cousins-esque, right? To go 2 years on a cap or on a tag. Remember, Kirk Cousins did that. And listen. In 3 years, he'd make, $97 million? That's nothing to sneeze at. But that's also not the 100 and some to 200 and some million dollars guaranteed that quarterbacks can get. The one thing the 49ers would know, and remember, it's not just this offseason that San Francisco management is like, we may have to pay Brock Purdy. This has been known for a couple of years, and you kind of know the numbers you're dealing with. And to Shefty's point, there is a ceiling to a number of what you can deal with, of the cap space you have. I think at this point they have 29, 30 million of cap space, but that changes with redone contracts and things like that. But you know basically the area that you're going to have to be or that you can't afford. At least if you're a good team, you do. So you know what has to happen around you. One of the reasons why you trade a Deebo Samuel getting older, contract, blah, 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 whatever, because you have to now. We kept talking about the greatest position to be in is the position, and the latest team in that position is Washington. A rookie contract where you still have a couple of years to go, where it's a rookie deal and you can build around them. That's what they had in San Francisco. They blew it with Trey Lance, but they hit gold with a 7th rounder in Brock Purdy. So this doesn't sneak up on them what they have to pay. And if they did not do a good job with the cap numbers and they have to hold off, then they're going to have to hold off. Again, Brock Purdy, his only retaliation is to say, I'm not signing a franchise tag and I'm going to sit, of which he's probably not going to do. Players aren't going to do that. So the tag, which players, again, loved when it first came out, can't stand right now, is a great tool for NFL teams to use. At least in a situation like this, to kind of put it on the back burner for a year. But again, foresight is key. All these teams should know when their quarterback is coming up and what the area of their number is going to be.
Oh, but Dad, they've known. To me, that's why this is the surprising part, that headlines like this are coming out, because this means that the 49ers want headlines like this coming out. And my kind of response to this is what they think of you. Like, we don't hear this debate, Dad. Correct me if I'm wrong. Did we hear this debate about a lot of the other quarterbacks that came up on deals? Because I'm looking at the steady progression of quarterback contracts that we saw. Jalen Hurts, $51 million a year. Lamar Jackson, $52 million a year. Justin Herbert, $52.5. Jared Goff, $53. Tua, $53.1. Joe Burrow, $55. Jordan Love, $55. Trevor Lawrence, $55. I don't remember hearing the tag talked about for a lot of those guys when it came time for all these paydays. But now all of a sudden, Brock Purdy, who's been the sports talk polarizing quarterback of choice for years, is getting up and getting the ready to finally get off that incredibly cheap rookie contract. And we're hearing $45 million in the tag. That does not reek of a franchise that's like, Dad, you just brought up Jaden Daniels. When it comes time to pay Jaden Daniels, Washington is going to sprint to the checkbook.
Yep.
Washington is going to bend over backwards if he goes out and puts up numbers, the likes of which Brock Purdy has put up. And so this franchise is clearly still looking at Brock Purdy, the talent level, and Kyle Shanahan, the play caller, and the rest of the surrounding weapons, and saying, this is only worth so much.
Yeah, listen, I get it. You're right. With those other quarterbacks, you don't talk about that at all. You don't talk about the franchise tag. And one of the biggest differences, really, of all those quarterbacks that you mentioned, I believe going through them, were all first rounders except for Dak. You know, Dak was a 4th rounder. Brock Purdy, you wonder if the 7th round still sits, on him. That just sticks with you for the rest of your life, which shouldn't be. If you come and you produce at that position, you should be paid. But to your point, it's a valid point on what teams want floating out there, and also what Brock Purdy is willing to accept. Maybe he's fine with $45 million. Listen, Zack Baun could have probably asked for more. He's tied for 3rd or 4th highest inside linebacker. He had a monster year. He could have said, I want to be the highest paid. He was fine with the $18 million a year. Maybe Brock Purdy is going to be fine with 45, 48, maybe $50 million a year. We don't know.
Well, because that's the other thing, is you start to think about, all right, if you start to get into the franchise tag game and all of a sudden we see the franchise tag doesn't stop other teams from reaching out, would there be other teams beating down the door to try and pry Brock Purdy out of San Francisco with the 49ers? I don't know the questions to all that stuff. You're kind of getting to the point now where the rubber's going to meet the road. And I always said this as we were sitting up here and talking about Brock Purdy, an incredibly productive player, doing everything you asked, still not special skill set wise in a ton of ways that sometimes makes this conversation a little hazy. And I said, we're going to find out when it comes time to put pen to paper. what the 49ers actually think. And this could be negotiation posturing, but again, man, it just feels so different from the usual things that we hear when franchise quarterbacks come up and have these conversations had about them. Ultimately, Dad, the best solution of this is probably get Brock Purdy signed to this long-term deal now, make it front-loaded. I'm sure it's not going to look exactly like those other deals. I'm sure he's not going to reset the quarterback market at $55 million a year for 5 years, because I don't think the 49ers view him in the same way that other teams view those quarterbacks, whether it's the top end of the draft or just the skill set or some combination of everything in between. It just does not appear that they see him like that, which is in line with the complicated conversation we've had around him since he's been in the league. And so we're going to wait and see what the next volley of this is from. These leaks and these headlines did sound like they came from 49ers land. I don't think there's any part of this where Brock Purdy's agents would want it out like this. So what the response from his camp looks like next is going to be very, very interesting. Jesse, let's look in the AFC West now for a little bit of news last night. We've talked about the aging receiver market around the NFL. Aging pass rusher got an interesting name added to it yesterday with Joey Bosa.
Yeah, so the Chargers have decided to move on. We're talking about from the 9-year vet Nick Bosa here in an unexpected move. What do you guys think? How are the Chargers going to address their pass rush now?
Yeah, Dad, I would imagine, through the draft, free agency is not one of those spots. Now, they also were one of the teams, and pretty much everyone involved could benefit from prying a Myles Garrett out from somewhere. The Chargers, as we mentioned, have a ton of cap money and cap space to work with and spend, so that would give them an opportunity to do so. But outside of that, Dad, you're talking about an NFL draft class that's full of defensive linemen, maybe more so in the interior than the exterior. But this was kind of a decision that felt inevitable. Last year, they made the choice between wide receiver and pass rushers in terms of who they were going to let walk. And they went wide receiver, and the pass rushers took pay cuts, but still was too much given the injury and age on Khalil Mack and on Joey Bosa. And so now you get him cut loose in a way that does not seem overly shocking to a lot of people around the league.
Yeah, the move saves him like $25 million in the cap, and it's a team that already had a lot of cap space. He's played 8 years. He was great early in his career, right? But in the last 3 years, he's played, I think, 28 games out of a possible 51 games. Last year, he did play 14 games. The year before that, 9. The year before that, 5. So he has been getting nicked up. And he's 29 years old, but played a lot of ball. So yeah, I think this was an inevitable move. You're right. Last year, the Chargers made the choice on the receivers. This year, it's on the defensive ends where they start to get younger, whether through the draft or through free agency. But still, again, you got to give Jim Harbaugh credit. I didn't think he'd make the playoffs. He made the playoffs in his first year while trying to kind of reassess, especially the offensive side of the ball and the wide receivers. They really hit it with Ladd McConkey incredibly well. Now they have to kind of rebuild from the edge.
Going to be interesting to see now who's in the market for a Joey Bosa. We know in the past he's mentioned, hey, it'd be cool to play with his brother Nick in San Francisco. They certainly need pass rush help. Just looking at the teams, Dad, that were in the bottom third in the league in sack production last year, that could certainly be one. We talk all the time about the Cincinnati Bengals trying to find someone opposite Trey Hendrickson, who we assume they're going to bring back there. The other interesting one, the Detroit Lions. Now, I don't know if they're going to try and go for someone a little more high end, but that is a team that can certainly afford to take some high, it's a risk to bring over Joey Bosa and expect him to be healthy enough to play a full season. But if you're Detroit, you really need guys that can come alive in the postseason and do your best to keep him healthy all year long and try and take a lot of reps and hits off of him, because you're playing by a different set of rules, even with all the coaching changes this offseason. So they'd be an interesting one to keep an eye on as a contender that has constantly been searching for some pass rush juice opposite Aiden Hutchinson. And Joey Bosa, again, while getting him and keeping him on the field has been a chore, when he's there, he's still a guy with a lot of twitch that can threaten an edge.
Yeah, but you just wonder if they would go a little, Josh Sweat mode in Detroit and get a guy who is going to be there for a few years. But they're definitely going to get a rusher. They definitely need an edge rusher to help Aiden in that defense out. But yeah, it is amazing. The name value of players that are going to hit the open market come March 12th. is pretty amazing. Because remember, all these players that are released, they are now free agents, and free agency starts March 12th. And again, the heavy-hitting free agents will get a call right away. That March 13th show we're going to do is going to be incredible as far as numbers that we're going to talk about of players that really hit the mother load right out of. And every player wants to be in that first bunch of phone calls, but not every player is. And, as the phone doesn't ring longer and longer, it's less and less money. But the name value of players that are available is pretty interesting.
Well, you're right, and I think the name in a lot of these cases is outpacing the current production and what's currently available. These are players that have been stars for a number of years, but are now, as I've always talked about, guys that are closer to my age range who are coming to the end of prolific Hall of Fame careers because they are old by NFL standards and not the young people like we used to be. And so for them relative to the rest of the free agent class, because overall, it's not a real loaded free agent class. I think that's why you're seeing a lot of these trades pop up, is because people are looking for the market of what's actually available and going, all right, it's probably worth us to spend a 4th, a 5th, a 6th round pick and some extra cash to pry these guys out of their situations with guys like Devontae Adams, with soon to be probably guys like Cooper Kupp, Tyler Lockett, and now Joey Bosa, as some of these veteran options. You're right. There's going to be some proven commodities there that all come with a little bit of a buyer beware on them because of age, injury, and otherwise. And what teams do with that's going to be very interesting. Coming up next, though, we'll take the temperature on all of this as free agency continues to heat up with our buddy Dianna Russini. She joins us at the top of hour number 2.
Welcome back to Gojo and Golic. In the NBA last night, it was an explosion of points. Okay, James Harden dropped 50 last night for the 24th time, pulling within one of Kobe Bryant for third most 50 games in NBA history. Now, in the Eastern Conference, it was a Boston 3 party for the defending champs. Do you guys get it? Because of Boston Tea Party. Both Peyton Pritchard and Derek White scored 40 points. This marks the first time in NBA history that a duo made 9 or more threes and 40 or more points in the same game. Stay tuned for hour 2 of Gojo and Golic. Dianna Russini joins us on the other side of this break.
All right, this is part of the fun of the lead up to NFL free agency and getting someone like our friend Dianna Russini here. You can check her out, the co-host of Scoop City with Chase Daniel, doing a great job as the senior NFL insider over at The Athletic. And as Dianna comes into the room with us to come on here and talk about all the reports she's had in the last 48 hours pertaining to NFL players potentially on the move, she logs on, and all we see is her on the phone and then her immediately walking away from the microphone. So this is the fast and furious world of news breaking in the NFL. We'll get to Dianna and find out what she was on the phone about, what's coming up in the market for a player like DK Metcalf, T. Higgins, both of whom are receiving calls despite currently being employed by other teams, as well as anything else coming down the pipeline in the NFL. One thing, Dad, that we did get at the end of the last hour, according to our buddy Field Yates, who was on yesterday on the show, ESPN NFL analyst and insider, the Browns have restructured Deshaun Watson's contract, creating nearly $36 million in cap space for this upcoming season. And at this point, that's about all Deshaun Watson is really good for, Dad, and that contract is working money around so that you can try and create space for something else, because at this point, we know he's likely done playing quarterback for them. That was the report and the things that came out yesterday. And so that likely the case there. The case here, Dianna Russini has sat back down with us. Dianna, how you doing? This has got to be an insane portion of the year as you're just sprinting back and forth here between phone calls.
It is. I love it, though. Like, this is why I do what I do. This is my favorite time of year. It's high pressure. Information is flying by the minute. I wake up I'm not on a lot of sleep, but when I do wake up, the texts are flowing, whether it's from my colleagues that are hearing things or people in the league. And it's like a big scavenger hunt before I even have my coffee of like, all right, what's interesting? And what winds up happening, and you guys have known me for so long, and you know I probably need to be a little bit more type A. And sometimes I wonder if I'd be better at my job if I was. But there's so much stuff out there, and then you'll see it reported and you're like, oh, I knew that. Why didn't I put that out there? I play in that space more than I ever have, actually. Now I'm like, oh man, I knew Joey Bosa was getting cut. Why didn't I tweet that? Like, there's just these like little moments, and I'm sure you can see in the tone of us from all the insiders when we knew it, and we're like, no surprise. Like, that's our way of being like, we knew. We forgot to tweet it. I got distracted. I was ordering a Starbucks or, picking up my kids, whatever it was, like, and even yesterday was so crazy. I unfortunately had to attend a funeral, and my mindset was like, I need to be there for my friend, but I just need 30 minutes. And I had my cell phone in my pocket. That thing was so rude. It was just buzzing. Bzz, 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 bzz. And I'm sitting there like, I can't look at this because it's disrespectful to my friend, but I need to see what this is. And it was killing me. I think the stuff I missed was when DK Metcalf asked for a trade, which most people knew at that point, but it got out. And so, yeah, I'm on this crazy hamster wheel.
So it when you say you insiders, you kind of, I should have tweeted it out. I know it was happening. One thing, did you know the Joe Thuney thing was going to happen? I mean, that took me by surprise. I know that Chicago wants to get better on the interior offensive line, but now that Kansas City offensive line is pretty depleted.
Yeah, it's layered. Yes, I did. I knew a few days ago, actually, that they were shopping him because they put it out there to teams so they could start, obviously coming up with some kind of trade. And you know what, Mike, it's funny. I don't react as much as I should in the moment. Like, you're right. Like, when I take a step back, it's like, oh my gosh, I never had that reaction. Because I just was like, okay, who would be in on them? Boom, 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 boom. All right, I know the Commanders need O-line. I know Patriots need O-line. Trying to think of other teams. The Titans need O-line. And I'm like going through immediately of like who the trade partner was going to be. But then, when you take a sit back on it and you kind of decompress, you realize, well, this is a team that really struggled protecting their quarterback in the Super Bowl. We saw Jalen Carter just have a day with them. They need to get better there. And this organization is so good at being very open with their issues, and they know that's an issue. So then they're treating, one of their vets. So that just tells me they're trying to make moves for someone else. So that's usually kind of the thought process there of everything's got so many tentacles to it. But I probably need to do a better job of going, oh, whoa, that's big. But I usually do that like later. I'm like I remember when AJ Brown got traded to the Eagles, and I was breaking that story, and it just never hit me. Like, I just was like, oh my God, gotta get it out. And like 5 days later, I was like, oh my gosh, AJ Brown's an Eagle. So it's hard to, you don't want to be a prisoner of the moment.
I love the idea of veteran NFL insiders processing the news that they broke on tape delay days later, like they live in Hawaii. It's got to be, but to your point, it's about figuring things out in the moment here, and that's what makes it really interesting. Like, I saw you reporting all morning to the DK Metcalf side of things about now the asking price for DK Metcalf. You reported that they're looking for a first and a third in return for the star receiver, who's also going to command a new contract. What does the market look like for that, Dianna, for DK Metcalf right now?
There's a lot of teams interested, but after I put that out, I started to get texts from those teams like, yeah, right. Way too much. Look, good for John Schneider and the Seahawks for asking for a lot right now. We all know that can change. That's just the starting asking price at this moment as they're trying to gauge, okay, what's the real interest here? How can we make this work? And then, there's always a scenario where they keep the player. That could always happen as well. My sense from the DK side to it, he obviously wants to get paid. He wants to play somewhere where it's warm. It was something I was told. Warm weather. He wants a more stable quarterback situation. So these are things that I think will play into some of the decisions here when we see if the Seahawks are able to really get what they want here for a player like DK, who, you look at those numbers, that's an AJ Brown trade number, like we were just talking about. So I don't think they land on that. I just think that for right now, that's the asking price. And so we'll see if they lower that a little bit to move their top receiver.
So again, a player can ask for a trade, but the team still holds all the cards. Let's play the either, neither, both game. Myles Garrett, DK Metcalf. Either, neither, both get traded.
Both get traded. I look, here's the
Really?
thing with the Myles. The Myles stuff is hard because Cleveland does not want to do this. They don't. They will tell you every single day. But we've been covering this league forever. We know how this goes. When you have a player of this caliber so disgruntled, who isn't in it for the money, according to him, and it's about competing for a Super Bowl, and he doesn't believe in the organization, and he sat with the owner and told him that. How? You can't make somebody happy. You can't make someone just be there, because then it causes all other sorts of problems in the locker room, on the field, and he's not showing up for workouts, and no GM or head coach wants to deal with that. So while the Browns are saying they don't want to trade him, I believe them. They don't. But there are certainly tons of teams watching this, hoping before the draft here, they break down and just go, all right, you know what? This is just going to get so messy. Let's get the best absolute compensation we could possibly get for the best player at his position.
Certainly, he's easy to that point. Everybody is in the market for a Myles Garrett. Everybody would want and benefit from him on that team. The DK conversation is interesting because, Dianna, it's also happening in tandem with the T. Higgins conversation, where I saw you reported that teams are still reaching out about him in the NFL class, despite the fact that he's on the franchise tag. So is this still the Bengals are the leaders in the clubhouse, or is there someone that you actually think might be able to pry him out of there?
Has been absolutely adamant about this. They've been working on Jamar Chase's deal, and they're allegedly focused on doing this right now. Teams are lurking, though. They want to see if he's going to become available. They don't have a lot of time here. So at this moment, on Thursday, March 6th, I can tell you Cincy is still focused on getting a long-term deal done. But we'll see how this plays out, because look, the number T's probably looking for is in that like $30 million range. He's on the tag right now at 26, roughly. They gotta find an in between here that works for him. And look, they've done this with him before. He's frustrated. He's not happy. Players hate the tag, as we all know. So for now, Cincinnati wants to keep Joe Burrow happy, and they want to keep both Jamar Chase and T. Higgins here. And I do think that the odd man out for now is Trey Hendrickson, because it's very difficult to figure out the money situation for all three of these guys. So for now, we'll see how this plays. I would call it fluid, though, for sure.
Yeah, Cincinnati says they want to sign all three. We'll see if they do. How about in San Francisco? You knew the area you would have to pay Brock Purdy, and then that there are thoughts of, does he play his last year on his deal, and do they tag him for obviously millions of dollars, and really kind of kick the can down the road before they get a full-time deal done? Or do you think a full-time, probably more likely a team-friendly deal gets done?
Yeah, this one has been dicey. If you asked me 2 weeks ago, I would have said it was going to be easier. I thought, what a naive thought by me, especially when it comes to a quarterback, right? Quarterbacks are always going to want to make top of the market money. And I think that's the issue here is you look at what the quarterbacks are being paid right now, and let's just put ourselves in the mind of the agent. Top of the market is Dak Prescott at $60 million. So Brock Purdy is the next quarterback up to make a lot of money. So I understand their side to it in terms of playing the lane of this is what the market dictates. But I think from the 49ers side of this is they've got a lot of contract issues they're dealing with. They've got to figure out a lot of money on how to make it work by paying Brock, but also by getting him players around him so they can have success. So at this moment, I can tell you, I feel strongly that they'll get it done. I just don't think it's going to be as easy as I expected it. And of course, Mike, as you mentioned, they've got the tag option. No one's going to want to do that, but they can do it. So San Francisco's got that opportunity there. But a deal that I thought was going to be done by the draft, I could see this thing leaking into the summer. And by the way, the Niners don't want to deal with this again in the summer. Look at what happened last year. We had the Trent Williams holdout. We had the Brandon Ayuk situation. Brandon Ayuk right now, they're trying to shop him, or at least they are shopping him. There's been some teams interested. They're poking around on that. The Niners, it's not a complete rebuild. That's not how I would describe it, but they're definitely toying with some contracts and shedding some cash here on some older players and trying to make some room to pay for Brock Purdy, but also making sure that the talent is still on this roster. They want to out next year and lose, especially knowing that they're the Super Bowl hosts. They're going to want to try to get back there.
That's a great point. Forgot that in the background as they get set to bring everybody into their party next year, and they hope that they're invited back to it in a way that they weren't this past season. Dianna, we could sit here and go through these notes with you all day. We know it is busy as hell for you right now, so thank you so much for giving us some of your time in the midst of this. We hope you don't get put into any more situations where you've got to be answering your phone in weird places.
It's constant, but I love it, guys. So thank you. Thank you for having me on. Free agency next week. You need me, I'm here, okay?
Deal.
Absolutely.
Deal.
No, the Dianna Russini free agency special here next week. You can book that one already. Thank you, buddy. We appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Love you both.
Thanks. See ya.
Dianna Russini, again, check her out, the senior NFL insider over at The Athletic, Scoop City podcast. And Dad, that's a tough one there. Because, again, trying to show up for your friend, be there at the funeral, and be respectful. But knowing, and we've heard this from Woj, we've heard this from all the insiders, that you're constantly balancing being a normal human being and trying to get ahead in the rat race that can be this job at times.
And you sit there and talk about the toughest situation of where you can check information, because these insiders have been live on air and their phone buzzes. They're going to look at it. They're going to get information. And at certain events, they're going to look at their phone. But a funeral, I mean, that's a tough one. That's a tough one to pull your phone out and kind of start scrolling.
I'm not going to lie, though. We've all pulled our phone out at a funeral, right? Like, it's not even like normal people. At this point, it's 2025. We're all criminally addicted to these things. You've pulled your phone out at a funeral, so if a normal person can do it, knowing your friend's an insider seems like an easy concession.
But you have to wait for the right time, and it's got to be killing her, feeling that phone buzz in her pocket, going, what am I missing? What am I missing? I need to look at this.
Yep, no. Coming up next, we can debate the timing of pulling your phone out at uncomfortable events or the NBA MVP. We'll find out next.
Welcome back to Gojo and Golic. We are inching closer to the end of the NBA regular season, which means, of course, we got to talk about MVP. It's what we do as we wrap this thing up. So SGA odds-on favorite to win, you guys. Feels like it's his to lose, right? Do you think he kind of has this one wrapped up?
I mean, odds makers would indicate he does.
Yes, interject, please.
Can I interject?
Yes.
Oh, God.
Can I interject?
We would love
Donovan
it.
Mitchell.
There was a team in the NBA that clinched a playoff spot with 20 games to go in the regular season last night.
Your
20 games to go,
Cavaliers.
they clinched a playoff spot. Yeah, the Cleveland Cavaliers. Why is everybody there behind the scenes who make up the rundown so adverse to talking about the Cleveland Cavaliers, who are sitting at 52-10, the best record in the NBA, clinched a playoff spot, albeit on a pretty wild play last night. They were up 3 against Miami. Duncan Robinson takes an inbound pass with 17 seconds to go, hits a 3 but stepped out of bounds before he hit the 3 that would have tied it, and Cleveland won. Why can't there be any discussion about the Cavaliers? Why are they put in a corner? Why are they put in a corner and disrespected? That's what I want to know.
Well, Senior, if you scroll down in the rundown, there actually is a little area down there. And it's in the next block.
Okay, a little area.
If
there's NBA talk, that should lead NBA talk.
Okay, fair. All right.
That should lead.
Fair enough.
Dad, as someone that's been around this industry for 3 decades, can you honestly look me in the face and say that a non-LeBron James or Kyrie Irving-led Cleveland Cavaliers team should actually be the lead on any sports program when it comes to talking basketball? Can you look me in the eye, honestly and truthfully, knowing what you know about this job, about what viewers generally tend to want, and say that you believe that with your whole heart? Because I don't think you can.
Only when I make it a point like this and not like come in like a serious note talking about the Cavaliers off the top. Only when I disrupt the rundown by saying the Cavaliers should be at the top to emphasize the point. Other than that, no. I can't justify it. Though, go Cavs! Go Cavs! Woo!
Yeah. Hometown hero.
I also want to be clear. You just tossed our producers under the bus for checks notes having the Cavs in the rundown in a place that you didn't read to yet. That's what we got to here, correct?
Oh, no. I saw it in the rundown, but it should lead NBA talk. Just the mention. How about just the mention? A 30-second mention. Hey, the Cavs won last night, 52-10, clinched a playoff spot. Give them the respect and then move on to SGA, who's going to win the MVP, blah, 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 blah. We know that well. Come on.
This is classic gotcha journalism by you, which is disgusting considering you're part of the old guard, and I thought you'd be better than this. We sit around every morning for a half hour, 40 minutes before the show, and we talk about things that we might want to change or we might want to do differently here, and you didn't fix your lips to say a word in defense of the Cavs then. No, you wanted to come out here and get this little clickbait moment right here. This is all you and your generation want, is little clips and things to go viral here. You don't have the wherewithal to just sit up here and have the discussion. It's disgraceful to watch you make a mockery of this profession and journalistic integrity overall by trying to catch our producers and the rest of the show in a moment just for your benefit. I'm on to you and your Cavaliers agenda.
No. Here's what I'm trying to do. As a 62-year-old guy who's been in this business for a long time and has also been a father to 3 kids, I am trying to teach the producers to have them learn, right, of the hierarchy of notes, okay? And if it means putting them on public blast, then so be it. Now, normally I'm not a public blast guy. Normally I'm a behind-the-scenes guy. But
I was just going to say, Mike Golic Sr., purported locker room guy. I just want purported locker room guy, living by the code, protecting your teammates, being a good teammate, now all of a sudden decides he would rather publicly throw them under the bus. That's an incredible about face in your 60s.
So as we talk about NBA over and over and over and over, the Cavaliers are over and over and over left out. Again, take this as a teaching moment. To put the headline of a team clinched a playoff spot with 20 games to go. Let's at least give it a mention off the top. And yeah, you're right. I didn't look far enough down in the rundown to see that we were going to talk about it.
We knew it. We did know it.
That's all we.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all we.
Yeah, we knew that.
That's,
Yeah,
the
it's true.
truth coming out there just for
That's true.
posterity.
Yeah.
And you know what? Listen, congratulations to the Cleveland Cavaliers. It has been a stellar regular season for this team. I think there are still plenty of people, and this becomes the common problem for the NBA, that are looking at this and going, all right, well, we know things change and get a little different coming up. Now, Dad, they've existed in the class. We're really, right now, the playoffs seem like a three-team race. It's the Cavaliers, it's the Celtics, and it's Oklahoma City on the other side. As Jesse mentioned, Oklahoma City, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, overwhelmingly the favorite right now on DraftKings Sportsbook to win MVP, minus 650 with Nikola Jokic next at plus 500. Now, it should be known that in the world of men's college basketball, I believe that Player of the Year award was similar, and now Cooper Flagg has flipped to the favorite of that, if I'm not mistaken. So this stuff can always change, but Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, despite many people, cough, cough, our producer Bailey, calling him a free throw merchant, which I disagree with, he's been so deadly consistent, and Dad, especially in the calendar year of 2025, been so productive that I think it would take an act of God to pry that award out of his hands. And I think they're the consensus best team in the NBA right now, with the Celtics and Cavaliers in tow. The difference is the Cavaliers aren't the most talented team in that conversation or the most complete. Most people look at that as Oklahoma City, and they don't also have the recent championship experience that the Boston Celtics have, where most people will defer to them come postseason time, because as recently as Chex notes last year, they were the team on the mountaintop. So unfortunately, even in that upper crust of the league right now, Cleveland a clear third in the pecking order, I think, in the minds of many.
Oh, yeah, I think so as well, and they'll get to obviously prove it on the court, first in the Eastern Conference Championships with Boston. But I have no problem saying I think Oklahoma City's the best team in the league, and SGA is the best player on the best team. And a lot of times, especially when you're putting up big stats like he is, that's going to get you the MVP. And he was a guy that's been in talk of the MVP, and normally it's talk first, and then you work your way up to actually being a realistic candidate, which he is. I mean, he's going to win it, I think, without question. And I just don't know who in the West. Certainly the Lakers sitting second. I know they're playing extremely well, 1-7 in a row, but you just scratch your head. Well, I believe it would be a good series with Cleveland and Boston. With Oklahoma City, I just don't know who's going to match up with them.
On their best day, I'm not sure anyone does. And we've seen the two bigs lineup that they've thrown out there now that Chet Holmgren's healthy with Isaiah Hartenstein has been incredible for them in the regular season. What it looks like in the and I get the way postseason basketball changes opens it up to a myriad of outcomes. But what they've been able to do, and again, the SGA stuff is just ridiculous. The 12th player in NBA history with at least 4 50-point games in a season. Mind you, his 54-point night came against the Rockets was the 4th time in 7 weeks he's hit 50-plus points. It's the shortest span in NBA history to record 4 50-plus point games. So he's been on one in the last 7 weeks of this season. And Dad, I think when we talk about, the face of the league stuff, all that kind of obscures just the larger conversation about basketball that people have been having stylistically. SGA does feel like a guy that to some extent is, we said Kyrie Irving the other day was the ultimate antidote to this. SGA is not far behind. I feel like a lot of it is just we want you to have a little bit of a mid-range game and have some other elements. And SGA is a guy that getting to the rack, shooting, being able to kind of pull the string in the mid-range seems to offer you something of everything and is so smooth in doing it that aesthetically, and the reason I sort of push back on the idea that he's a free throw merchant is because James Harden, who went off last night and had a phenomenal game for a Clippers team, that's an interesting outcome the postseason. James Harden does seem to have a game overall never been aesthetically pleasing, does seem like he's blatantly hunting free throws and fouls. Yes. SGA's game has been a lot smoother and a lot more enjoyable to watch overall as we've gone through this, and we've seen a lot of them. Oklahoma City's been a team that's been on national television a ton, and I've never walked away going, man, I did anything other than enjoy getting to watch him play basketball.
Yeah. I agree. I think because of the stark contrast of James Harden trying to draw the foul and just the smoothness of SGA, I agree. I haven't not walked away from a game. Again, I haven't watched a ton of games, but saying, oh, my God, this dude just is doing everything at the free throw line. He's a deserving MVP candidate and will deserve the award playing for the best team. So as we get closer and closer to the end of the regular season and the playoffs take shape, obviously we'll discuss it more and more as long as we give the Cavaliers their love that they deserve.
There we go. Number one Cavaliers show, Gojo and Golic, for all of your needs in the greater Cleveland area. Dad, I want to switch gears a little bit because to your point, coming up against ahead of the end of the NBA season for a lot of teams, we've had this discussion with a team like the 76ers. The conversation for so many is going to turn towards the draft. And all we've heard going back to last year is, hey, this 2025 NBA draft class between homegrown products here in the United States, between foreign prospects, the way that we've been used to for the last number of years, loaded with talent. Like number one overall picks in so many prior years' drafts could be relegated to the rest of the lottery. And that conversation's been led by Duke's Cooper Flagg. Andy Staples over at On3 wrote the article the other day that Flagg could potentially withdraw from the 2025 NBA draft if he didn't like the team that lands the first overall pick in the lottery. The deadline to withdraw is on June 15th, and that lottery occurs on May 12th. So you'd have a lot of time to do that decision, Dad. And we've had this conversation with NFL players. We did it last year. We did this last year a little bit with Caleb Williams, but certainly basketball-wise, this is not a conversation we're foreign to. Do you think there's actually any legs to this, especially now that NIL has created an environment where these guys are making legitimate money in college?
Well, I think that's the key. Cooper's making $4.8 million this year, and be sure to make at least that or more if he came back next year. So it's not like they're staying in college and waiting on their payday so they can, play in college. He's the highest paid college basketball player this year. Maybe a lot depends on the run that they make in the tournament this year. Do they win the championship? They win the championship. Does he say, okay, I'm going to head off to the NBA? Do they get close where they say, he says, you know what? I can make $4, $5, $6 million, try and get a title the next year and go in. How much is into the thought process of what team picks? Is it Washington? Is it Utah? Is it New Orleans? That I don't understand, Mike, because Charlotte, Washington, New Orleans, Utah, are we expecting them to be are we expecting a great team to have the first pick next year? I mean, you're going to go to most likely outside of a trade, or if a pick is guaranteed somewhere else. I mean, there's so much going on in the NBA with that. You're most likely going to go to a bad team. That's why I thought there was ridiculous talk with Caleb Williams that he was going to go back, not declare because of the. No. You're going to go to a bad team for the most part. And obviously, now going back, you can get paid in college and make some money, which is cool. But there's also the part of starting your NBA clock to that next contract, which is a monster contract, which puts NIL money to shame, right? So there's certainly a lot to think about. But the thinking about I'm going to a bad team, to me, is kind of a ridiculous thought.
It's just interesting. Cooper Flagg and these NIL valuations are always interesting to me. $4.8 million, but I don't know if that's from the collective. I don't know if he's got deals with Fanatics, New Balance, Gatorade. Right. He's represented by CA. He's an NBA player. That's where we're at now with these guys. Is there's no line delineating them between their brethren other than the clock you mentioned towards that second contract that matters. It will be interesting. Revenue share is going to start and jump that up. Like the salaries are going to get close. The Zachary Risachet is making $12.6 a year right now as a rookie on his deal. So you're not that far off eventually. It's going to maybe get close enough to make that interesting. I do think the specter of that second contract is going to be there. But, man, the way some of these NBA teams don't have their house in order, a la Washington, do you want to go there and potentially risk tanking your career early on with a franchise that doesn't seem to display any aptitude for bringing in and fostering talent right now? I think eventually someone might try this, Dad. I don't think Cooper Flagg is going to be the one just yet with where we're situated. College sports still new to a lot of the way that this is structured right now. Still figuring this out, and I think the NBA and that clearly defined structure and that march towards a gigantic second contract is the thing that's ultimately going to sway the balance here for one of the best players in college basketball. Coming up next, let's check in with Kyrie Irving and the Mavs here on Gojo and Golic. Before we get an update on Kyrie Irving and a bit of protest on the way things have been framed from one Jason Kidd, a text message from my mom this morning sums up my dad's Cleveland Cavaliers rant very well. My dad hijacking the wheel on this show to talk about this Cavaliers team that he intermittently cares about and throwing our producers under the bus in the process under the guise of a teaching exercise. My mom writes, Dad is still teaching, but has stopped learning. Got it. My dad, who's famously said multiple times on this show in real life, he has opted out of learning, but apparently still feels like teaching. Riddle me that one, Dad.
Well, I feel I have the wisdom of 62 years and the wisdom of decades in this business to impart my knowledge on the younger crew in the ways things are done. As far as learning anything new, I feel I have hit my capacity in that, and also have an outlet of your mother, my wife, Chris, and my 3 kids, and a couple of, son-in-law and a daughter-in-law as well, to now really have me as a soft landing spot for learning. So I can work on and concentrate on imparting my wisdom to those who need it, as opposed to trying to absorb anything new of which I can just seek help on, right? I mean, I am certainly willing to work with others to learn more, but out of the entire group, outside of your mother, who is obviously close to me in age, I have the wisdom to impart on those. Jesse, I mean, what do you think? Does that sound plausible?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I also feel like you're born with a certain amount of F's to give. And as you get older, there are less and less of those F's. And once you reach a certain age,
you know what? That may have encapsulated it better than what I just said. I tried to say some eloquent speech, but that may be it. That may be it. I just don't give any F's anymore.
Yeah, and like respect. I can't wait to get to that point. I feel like I'm kind of already there, but yeah.
Yeah, I do feel like the current state of things is exhausting a lot of the F's faster than most of us had budgeted for when we wrote out the F's budget at the beginning of our tenure.
Yeah.
The thing I will say is, Dad, as I was going through that, I've realized now how Dad views us as the other parts of his family. Because Dad basically said, I'm comfortable with like the iPhone 10. I don't need to upgrade beyond this, even though they've changed a bunch of software. They've changed all the plugs because they're constantly changing the plugs so that you got to buy new plugs. We're just adapters for Dad. Dad's going to stay the same way he is, and he's going to use us as a series of dongles and adapters to just make sure that he can get to the information. That's all we are to you, Dad, are dongles and adapters at this point.
Yep, you guys are my cords. That's exactly right. If something new comes along, I just go to you. That's exactly right. You know what? There's really no more space in my head for newness, for learning newness. It's full of decades of information, mostly in sports, that I need to pass on. It really isn't in an area to absorb anymore. It's in an area of emitting knowledge and wisdom to the younger generation. How's that?
Yeah, that was deep. And it also makes a lot of sense because I feel like I already don't like learning new things. And it's you, again, you just feel like there's not enough room in your brain. I mean, that's what having kids is for, right, Senior? So that you can just use them to help you.
Yeah, it's exactly right. I mean, I raised you kids. It's about time you kids give back to me, okay? I gave to you, still giving to my kids. How about giving back? And I don't just mean when I need to be taken care of when I'm in my 80s and my 90s. I mean, start to give back now.
Well,
okay?
I think Gojo taught you how to
in return.
He taught you how to use the retweet button on Twitter, I think. So
yeah,
that was
listen,
pretty good.
This isn't about, listen, I've said this for decades. You don't love all your kids the same. I have 3 kids. I rank them every day.
Okay,
right?
Dion.
I rank every single day. So it's just a matter of this is a transactional relationship now. All right? I've raised you. Now what can you kids do for me?
Yeah.
Now that I've raised you. All right? I've done for you. What can you do for me?
So who's in first place today?
No. I mean, not Mike after bringing this up.
Okay.
Not Mike after throwing me under the bus for the Cavalier thing.
Makes sense.
So I haven't even talked to the other 2 kids today, but right now Mike's third.
Okay.
Mike's third.
All right.
That's fine. I'm pretty comfortable where I sit on the right side of history because if we're talking about bus throwing, let he who is without sin cast the first stone, and that won't be my father, Mike Golic Sr. Speaking of new things, the other thing I wanted to bring up, Jay Billis, thank you, the voice of reason. I don't watch a ton of men's college basketball during the regular season. This year has been exciting to parachute in the SEC. It's been a great conference. We talked to Bruce Pearl about that a while ago. I saw Tennessee just got upset by Ole Miss last night, so that had to be a ton of fun.
Right.
But in the process of calling the Florida and Alabama game, Jay Billis said what I had been thinking for years, what seems obvious, but I don't like to come in and try and tinker too much with people's sports that I don't actually care about all that much. Jay Billis saying we need to go to quarters in men's college basketball, as this exists the only place in basketball played in the world where they're still operating with halves. Not over in Europe, certainly not in the NBA. Women's college basketball playing quarters, and a much more palatable game television-wise here. It makes fundamentally no sense, at least from a visual standpoint and from a user experience, from a watching standpoint, why we wouldn't be going to quarters. So I just wanted to thank Jay Billis, often someone who we know espousing Jeezy lyrics and talking about the demise of the NCAA. This to me was like, all right, the call coming from inside the house on something that seems to be a no-brainer issue, Dad.
Yeah, well, I agree. And I don't know why men's college basketball is waiting to go to quarters. Maybe they don't want to seem like they've been pushed into change because everybody else goes with quarter. The women's game going to quarters. And maybe they just don't want – it's kind of like college football and NFL football. College football doesn't want to do things that the NFL is doing. They don't want to mirror each other. So I don't know the reason. I can't figure out the reason. But Jay Billis, who – is a lot smarter than me and still does continue to learn, it brings up a great point, a great commonsensical point.
Yeah, exactly. Common sense, decidedly not common. Jay Billis definitely still learning here. And Dad, Jason Kidd speaking up on the Kyrie Irving injury, saying that he didn't think it was fair to connect the minutes that Kyrie had been playing and had added to his plate to the injury that he ultimately sustained here. Where are you on that, Dad? Do you think that had, I know a lot of people brought that up as connecting this back again to the Luka Doncic trade.
I see more soft tissue injury that would relate to that if you were a player that all of a sudden had to play more, especially later in the season. But an ACL, I don't see that. I just don't. I leave that more as a calf, as a hammy, as a quad, as a soft tissue injury than I do a ligament injury. So I would agree with Jason Kidd on this.
Jason Kidd said, for those who are listening to the podcast side, we're talking about one play, not many before that. It's a freak accident, and that's how it should be reported. We're reporting on conspiracy theories. We want our stars to play. This isn't supposed to be a rest league. And listen, it's a valid point. People talking out of both sides of their mouths by saying, yes, we like to see more of our star players, but the minute something like this happens, oh, look at that. And there's not a lot of consistency involved in that. Yates, our producer, brought it up in the last segment, though. All of this is a concern used to circle around the Cavs and just a cursed franchise. We can officially say it now. We danced around it the other day. Mavs are cursed until further notice, and I don't know what breaks it. Dad, the guy we should feel worse for, or at least bad for in all of this, Klay Thompson, man. Klay Thompson comes over to Dallas thinking they're on the cusp of something, leaving behind a Golden State dynasty, kind of akin to what we talked about with Joe Tooney and his run with the Patriots and the Kansas City Chiefs. And now, not only is Klay watching this franchise burn down around him, but his ex all of a sudden recruits Jimmy Butler, and they look good as new.
I mean, think about him. He's played in, he started every game, 55 games this year. Every game he's played in, he started. Just think about him going on the court, of who he had on the court, who was off the court, who then went back on the court, and now who was off the court again. He has to just be shaking his head in disgust every time he walks onto the court at the start of the game on just where this team is this year, and quite honestly, where it's going in the next year or two.
Everyone in that building's hurting. They had all just been to a championship last year, but Klay's been winning these things for the longest, and now he's got to look around and deal with this bleep. Yeah, no thanks. Let's finish up the show the way we always do. It's this, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you to the rest of the day. Make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review our show. Leave us a 5-star rating. Watch us live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the Gojo and Golic YouTube channel. Subscribe and hit the bell there. Thank you to our friend and the Athletics NFL insider, Dianna Russini, for joining us earlier today. Check her out, Scoop City, her and Chase Daniel. Plenty of NFL news to get into today. The future for DK Metcalf, T. Higgins, and plenty of others around the league as we march towards the true start of free agency. You missed that? Check it out wherever you get our podcast or right here on YouTube as soon as we get done. Dad, let's start off with this. This is a fascinating bit of technology that I love to see. For someone, I know you've given up on learning, but for these NBA teams that want to continue to grow, the Toronto Raptors are training at the ASB Glass Floor Athletes Lab in Orlando right now. The court uses LED lights to change to any court that you want, even NBA Cup courts, and allows you to draw up X's and O's on the court. So you can literally, Dad, take what you would be doing on the whiteboard and put it onto the court. The plays that we see drawn up all the time on sidelines, they can diagram it on the court for their players to actually go out and execute in a way that seems fascinating to me and just another really helpful tool for the modern NBA.
Oh, this is incredible technology. To draw up an actual play on the court and have it change to different designs. Now, when I first saw LED floor, I thought, oh, okay, wait a minute. This is going to be the floor changing colors while you're playing, which would be a ridiculous thing, right? It would make players kind of lose their minds. But this, I mean, listen, technology just keeps getting better and better. This is an incredible piece of art, quite honestly.
And I'm sure they've been able to use it too, and I'd be curious because we hear a lot of teams, the way they structure their practice courts kind of put the emphasis on, these are the spots on floor where we want the shots to come up from, these for the statistically, analytically, the most valuable areas on the floor. And so now you can reinforce that visually in a way that all of a sudden over the course of repetition can really help guys execute at a higher level. This is one of the rare instances of something that, like you said, Dad, could be flashy. We see this all the time where people will do intricate and elaborate videos on the ice in an NHL game where they're trying to do something. This actually meets form and function in a really interesting place. So cool move by the folks at the Toronto Raptors. I'm sure this is kind of like the VR technology in the NFL. I'm sure a lot of people are using something very similar to this, and we're going to see more and more of it come up. Jesse, let's get to that in something equally as important in advancing the ball in modern technology.
So guys, big news. A Cheeto shaped like the beloved Pokemon Charizard has sold at auction for a whopping $87,840. I would like to read the listing to you because I laughed out loud. Presented is a 3-inch long flamin' hot Cheeto in the shape of the Pokemon Charizard, affixed to a customized Pokemon card and encapsulated in a clear card storage box. So when I heard this, when I read it, I was like, oh, okay, it's gonna be like a little Cheeto kind of looking like, this looks like someone hand molded this Cheeto to look like Charizard. I mean, somebody who's in the back with the Cheeto thing, plopping those things down on I don't know how Cheetos are made. They really went off with this one because it is an artistic rendering of Charizard, and it says that they preserved it specially, but it's Cheeto. It's got all those chemicals in it. I think it would just be preserved naturally if you didn't eat it.
Yeah, I wonder how long you would have to leave a Cheeto out and in what circumstances for it to actually show signs of wear and tear, given the fact that you're essentially eating an edible packing peanut, which is delicious, by the way. I had Cheetos yesterday. But that being said, Jesse, I'm with you. These are one of those things that kind of like Twinkies, I'm sure would survive an apocalypse with relative ease.
Yeah, definitely.
This sold at auction for $87,000. 87. Somebody gave up, I don't care how much money you have. You gave up 87,000 of it for a Pokemon-shaped Dorito. That's point number one.
It's a
point
Cheeto.
Number two.
It's a Cheeto.
Please,
Cheeto.
Have some respect.
A flaming hot Cheeto.
A flaming hot Cheeto. Okay. Number two, I always love any time we bring up Pokemon because that's got to just stab Mike in the heart for what his mother had done when you guys and you and your brother, really you and Jake, had all those Pokemon cards and your mother threw them away, and how much money she may have potentially thrown away.
Yeah. Oh, it's untold riches that have just been thrown by the wayside. And it's one of the few things. My mom has done so much for all of us. She is the rock and the glue that holds our family together. But that's the only time in my life that she's betrayed me. That's the only time in my life she's betrayed me. That moment where I left for college and came back and all of a sudden the binders full of holographic Charizards and the Mew card from the first Pokemon movie that I went and sat in line for and all these different memories and things. that kind of like, I mean, we always thought this was going to be the Beanie Babies. Like anyone who had the Princess Diana Beanie Baby back in the day thought they were sitting on a gold mine. We thought that was college paid for, retirement, and then it turns out the Beanie Baby market really bottomed out. Pokemon cards always seemed like they got the gas, and that's why that felt like such a betrayal, because I was just trying to hold on to that nest egg to take care of the family. To your point, Dad, to give something back to you guys that had done so much for us, that was the way that I had tried to prepare for it, and unfortunately that plan got thwarted.
So they were like in binders, and then the binders got thrown away?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Were they in binders? I don't know that they were in binders.
Because I was
just
going
know
to
your mother
say,
tossed them.
I can relate to being the mom and being like, I've told you 1,000 times to clean this up, or this is a mess and I need to organize it, and some of this stuff's getting thrown away. But, you know, a little questionable if you had it organized and it still got thrown away.
Yeah, no, and my mom has apologized for this over and over again, and I've heard them, and I have forgiven her, but I can't forget. I can't forget because it's too important, and these things are so valuable that even a Cheeto form of one of the most beloved characters and off-reference characters in Pokemon history is worth $87,000 at auction. So,
I don't understand how somebody can actually. Again, you got to have dumb money to be able to do that, but $87,000 of your money for a Cheeto that looks like a Pokemon.
Yeah, it's Art Senior, okay? So.
Oh,
yeah,
it is, huh?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Again, to Jesse's point, the fact that you got what clearly has to be like a couple of different Cheetos that got stuck together in this perfect form. These are like the people that find like Jesus's face in toast. You don't look this gift horse in the mouth. You take it to auction and you sell it for a ton of money. Jesse, let's get to the third while we stay hungry.
Yeah, speaking of food that could survive a nuclear winter, it looks like you tried out a new Rice Krispie treat ice cream sandwich yesterday, Gojo. Care to tell us what that was like?
Good. For the most part, I was just, we talked about the modern marvel that was the Cheetos art and everything that went into making that. You guys know, what do you think of every time you have an ice cream sandwich? When I bite down into this, is it going to shoot ice cream all over the place and splatter out of the sides? And so with two Rice Krispie treats beefing this thing up, I thought for sure that was going to be this fate. That ice cream bar was packed in like a neutron star. There was nothing I could do, no amount of pressure I could put on the sandwich to compromise the integrity. It was really, really impressive stuff. The sandwich itself was just fine, but this was more to me a structural marvel that really impressed the hell out of me.
Wow.
I'm with you, because normally when you have like ice cream between two cookies or something like that, the ice cream does ooze out, which, I don't mind, but it just makes it a little messier. Now, Rice Krispie treats aren't the most flavorful thing in the world, and I don't know how tasty the ice cream was. So while you did the taste test on this, I don't imagine it was the tastiest thing in the world, but there was way more ice cream in that than I thought there was going to be. There was a good chunk of ice cream in it.
You're right. The taste didn't overwhelm you, but I've always said this. The hallmark of being a fat kid is seeing sandwiches where other people just see normal food items, whether it's doing that trick where you rip off the top of the cupcake and then put the bottom on top of it, so now you've got a cupcake sandwich, or just in general, hunting sandwiches out of other sugary items. And so I just appreciated someone clearly baked out of their mind at the Rice Krispie factory, like, what if we put ice cream between these things? And the rest is history. So, again, is it something you got to go too far out of your way for? Probably not at this point. But is there a beautiful novelty and a little bit of nostalgia about seeing that blue Rice Krispie wrapper? One that back in my day when we were in college doing snack the night before games at Notre Dame, the middle of the floor between the two beds in my room, between me and my roommate Braxton Cave, littered with Rice Krispie treat wrappers that would be stepped on in the middle of the night. That and Uncrustables, the currency of that world of my life. The currency of our world now is ratings. Download, subscribe, rate, review this show. Leave it a 5-star rating. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.